Previously, I'm embarking on a fairly ambitious new project. I want to make something amazing, something that you'd be able to base a career on. But I'll need your help. I'm only just getting started. Could take 6 months to a year of development time, but it will be special and it will be community based, and it's going to be great. Hi. Things are going to get a bit technical today because I want to talk about audio routing. That's inputs, effects, and outputs. I've had quite a bit of a tricky time trying to figure out how to make this work in Loopy, and I'm still not quite sure I'm there, so I would definitely appreciate any feedback you guys can offer. So the idea is I want to be able to make this as flexible as possible, but flexibility comes at the cost of making the user interface quite complicated, at times impossibly so, as you're about to see. I would like to be able to make it so that you can set this up any way you like, standalone. Of course, the other option here is to keep Loopy really simple and let AudioBus do all of the audio routing. It's what it was designed for after all. But if it's something that people are going to do a lot, for example, routing different inputs to different tracks of channels, different channels of tracks, then I kind of want it to work on its own well, without having to use AudioBus all of the time as part of your basic core setup. So I've been trying to figure out what is core in this instance, and that's where you guys are going to come in, because I'd like to know whether you want to be able to, for most of the time, route different channels of multi-channel input hardware to different tracks, or route the outputs of tracks to different channels of hardware. I mean, is that something that is likely to be a core feature that you guys would like? Or is it something that could be relegated to AudioBus, where you Loopy will expose, like Loopy does right now, Masterpiece will expose all of the tracks, both as inputs and outputs. Loopy currently only exposes tracks as outputs. But as inputs, you could then send any particular channels to the tracks in AudioBus, and of course, outputs, you could route them wherever you like once we get around to doing multi-channel output. So that's an option that I'm still considering. Would that be sufficient? Because if so, it means I can skip doing the interface in Loopy. But anyway, I've plowed on in the expectation that we'd like it in Loopy, and I've done my best to try and make that work. But it's taken me no less than 6 times, and I'm still not quite sure I'm there yet. So I want to walk you through the 6 different attempts, just to give you an idea of what the design process looks like and the challenges that I've encountered along the way. So we'll start at number 1. This is my original attempt. So the idea here was to give a bit of an AudioBus-like interface. You'll see there are inputs, effects, and outputs. So inputs were, there's only one control here. This is just a big button, and when you tap it, you get this screen where you see all of the input channels here, and then you can map them to channels of the track. Now you see here tracks are stereo by default, but I've allowed for the creation of additional channels per track. So for example, if you want to loop 3 different instruments at once, then you can have 3 different channels, or if you want them stereo, you can have 6 channels. You can just choose however many channels you want on the track. Now I gave that idea up because that's way too manual, but anyway, this is my first attempt after all. So here you tap each of these track channels to select which one you want that to go to. So here we've got channel 1 of the input going to channel 1 of the track. So that's inputs to track, and then we have track to outputs. And that's where this is happening. So we get here by going back to the audio writing screen and then tapping on the output button. Here we are. So it's the same deal. You've got the channels of the tracks. Now by default, of course, it's stereo, 2 channel. But if you create more, you'll have more rows here. And then you tap the channels that you want that to go to. So of course you could have more than one. So you could bridge it to stereo, and that was the idea. And then you've got effects, of course, which work like they do in AudioBus, in that you tap the plus to add them and they can chain, and you can tap the eject button to remove them, and you tap the icon itself to go into and edit the effects of that particular setting. So that was attempt 1, and it was too deep. You have to go too deep into menus to access stuff. And there's no nice way to get an overview of how this works. This dialog is, by the way, per track. So you select a track, you go configure, and then you configure the routing for that track. But there's no overview. You can't just look at a glance and see which channels are going to which tracks. And yeah, although there is this global setting which provides a default, it just was a little bit difficult to manage. So attempt number 2 tried to address that. And it also tried to make this interface a little bit more at a glance so that you didn't have to go into these dialogues. So this is, sorry, not that, I've gone too far ahead. This is what that looked like. So this is, again, per track. And the idea was you get the whole thing at a glance. So you've got input channels along the top here, output channels along the bottom, and track channels in the middle. And you join them together. It's like a kind of graph connection thing. So you'll see there's one of these boxes for each channel. So you can, if you wanted to bridge 3 and 4 to channel 1, you just slide that to there and that to there, and then it goes in. Right now, this setup is depicting a stereo input across 3 and 4, and then that goes to 1 and 2 of the output. So it's all right. It's not ideal. It's still a little bit complicated, and I think at a glance, I think it would be too difficult to immediately see what's going on. I tried to address the issue with not getting an overview by having this design screen view where you have little icons on each track showing what they're doing. But it's very messy. There's a lot of information here, and you would have to stare at it for a long time to actually figure out what's going on, which is unacceptable. The other thing I did here was have a settings screen that was global, where you can label the particular input channels with icons. So you can say channel 1 is a guitar. That means you don't have to then remember what is what, but I think it's probably too much complexity to be worth worrying about. You can also set the monitoring settings here, so you can mute a channel if you like. And there are global effects too, which are going to happen pre-track. So these are destructive operations, are kind of like insert effects, I suppose. And that was for the whole session. Then you can set up effects per track. So it was all right, but I decided I could do better. So I moved on from this to, I'm not quite sure why I thought this was better, but this was the next idea. So this was again per track, and you can select multiple tracks or a group of tracks and configure them as a group. So you don't have to do this once for every track, but the idea was you get everything at a glance for each track. So you can see which channels are going to the effects. You can change the icon by tapping these and then selecting an input item, and you can select whether you want to monitor or not. That's this control right here. And then you can route them to particular effects. So this is an effects block. That's a delay, not the best icon, but the idea was to provide these sort of audio routing things. So you can then add another effect using this button, and then it'll add it to here. And then if you wanted to chain them, you can actually go from the output here to the input of the next one. Anyway, again, impossibly complicated. It's funny because I was so happy when I finished this. I thought I had it, but Sebastian, who's my business partner, quite quickly saw that it was just impossibly difficult. Sebastian, by the way, so he's my business partner at AudioBus, and he's kind of like a multiplier. He makes everything that I do orders of magnitude better. He's got an amazing eye for user experience and user interaction. He understands people a lot better than I do with respect to what users expect and see in an app. And yeah, he just makes everything I do a lot better. So if there are any developers watching, I can't recommend this guy enough. He's worth every penny, and yeah, he does great work. So anyway, that was my, I don't even know what we're up to here, 3 or 4 attempt. And that had the same at a glance thing where we've got these icons here on the tracks, and it was just no good. So we had a chat, Sebastian and I, about the complexity of this stuff, and how, you know, the more complexity you have, the worse the user interface is, and that if this stuff is going to be too complicated, no one's going to use it because it'll be no fun. So I pared it back to the basics. I figured, okay, have a global configuration that just allows you to specify the inputs, and all the inputs are going to get mixed together. So this is what I came up with. So this is in the settings screen. There's no per track configuration here. And you tap on the channels that you want to hear, and they're all going to get mixed together into a stereo stream. So that makes the app purely stereo. All tracks are stereo, and the output is stereo as well. So they just get mixed together. And yeah, you can select monitoring here. So once you've selected a channel, you can tap to the right-hand side of that button to toggle monitoring on and off. And all tracks are going to receive this audio input, just as a stereo stream that's mixed. So the advantage is obviously the simplicity, because you can immediately see what's happening here. But you can't send inputs to different tracks. I didn't think that would be a problem initially when I made this. I figured, because Loopy Masterpiece's primary function is as a looper, you'd be able to separate all your different tracks in time, because, you know, you're not going to be playing an instrument and playing a different instrument at the same time. You're going to do one and then you'll do the other, so you'll separate them in time. But I have got a lot of requests from you guys to actually send inputs to different tracks, and I suppose so you can do things like simultaneously record vocals and guitar, and it lets you build up loops faster, and I kind of get it. So I tried again, and actually I ended up coming full circle, because this is what I came up with, which is a little bit like that first one I showed you, but with less drilling down. So the input stuff, again, this is a button, and when you tap it, you get a pop-up with the channels that you can select. So you tap and put a tick beside the channels that you want to hear, and you also get monitoring controls here, which is just a little button you can tap. So once you've selected them, the channels that you've selected appear as a little diagram here with, so this is for a fictitious 8-channel audio interface, and the channels that are selected are colored in, so you can see immediately what channels are going in. The next thing here is the tracks that this applies to. So there's always going to be one pipeline here, which is sort of the master pipeline that controls all of the tracks as a default. So the idea was here you show a visual representation of the workspace with the tracks that it applies to colored in, so you can immediately see what tracks that pipeline is controlling. Now if you want to add specific settings for a particular track or a set of tracks, you can tap this Add Routing button, and it brings up another pipeline and then lets you select which tracks to apply that to. So again, you tap and you put a tick beside the tracks that you want, and you've got this little visual representation here, so you can see the track is colored in on this little interface. So once you've done that, you can then set the input channel again, so you can see this is channel 3, because it's colored in, and the master channel then changes so that it affects only the unconfigured tracks. That's a kind of catch-all default. So you can add more audio inputs by tapping the plus button, and that lets you select, for example, inter-app audio effects or inputs. And I'm thinking also other tracks, so you can actually send the output of one track into another track. And then, of course, you can configure the outputs as well using the same interfaces for the inputs, where you've got a selector. So that, I felt, was getting pretty close. Sebastian even kind of liked that one. But there's effects missing. So I tried once more, and I made it full screen, and I added an effects box here. So now it's the same, but then you can tap this plus button here and you can select effects. You'll notice that they are post-track, which means they're kind of like send effects, really. So the tracks will record the unaffected audio, and it means that the effects that come after are editable and automatable, which, yeah, kind of gives you a few more controls while mastering. So, and then of course you can add another pipeline, and that's how it looks. Now, I think that's as close as I've gotten, but it's a bit complicated still. I mean, there's a lot going on in this screen. So I suspect, given that I've tried this so many times, and every time that I've tried to do everything I want, I end up with a interface that is arguably too complicated. Maybe this is just too much to do. So I'm still figuring this out. I don't really know which way to go yet, whether it's worth using this or maybe this interface and having track effects in the track configuration screen just kind of separated so that you don't have to deal with too much at once, even though you don't get a at a glance overview. Or maybe just to do all of this in Audio Bus. I don't know. I mean, feedback is definitely welcome, and this is something I'll be continuing to work on over the next few weeks. So, well, that's about all I have to say about that. If you have any feedback, I'd love to hear it, and if you've got this far, congratulations and thank you. So I'm going to talk to you next week. Thanks. See ya.